The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room park Una had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of vapor gathered near the top, lit by floating lights that moved like slow fireflies. 12 different species sat in there. Elevated seats, arranged in a circle around a small platform in the center. That platform was where Una now stood, feeling very small and very alone. She was not actually alone. Behind her stood Captain Kang Do-yoon, a military man with a stern face and careful eyes. Next to him was Dr. Lee Gion, a scientist who had spent her whole career dreaming of meeting alien life. Now that they were here, surrounded by creatures beyond imagination, Gin looked more frightened than amazed. Una understood that fear. She felt it too. But she could not show it. Earth was counting on her. The Velith were the first species she noticed. They were tall, insect-like creatures with bodies made of something that looked like living crystal. When they moved, light broke through them and scattered into rainbows. Their leader, High Arbiter Thiessen, sat at the highest seat. Eyes watched Una with what she could only describe as bored amusement. The Moretti were harder to look at. They had no solid form, just blobs of glowing jelly that changed color as they communicated. Right now, they pulsed with dull orange, which Una's translator device told her meant contempt. There were others. The tall, thin Yashari with their gray skin and large black eyes. The Krelloks, who looked like walking mountains of rock and moss. The Fenari, small and furry, but with teeth that could bite through steel. Each species had conquered space long before humans learned to make fire, and they all looked at the human delegation like they were looking at insects. Yuna took a deep breath and began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I am Ambassador Park Una of the United Earth Government. I come to you with a request for help. 3 weeks ago, the Krovik Dominion declared our solar system a harvesting zone. They have announced their intention to strip our planet of resources and take our people as slaves. We asked the Council to intervene." She paused, waiting for a response. What she got was laughter. It did not sound like human laughter. The Velith clicked their mouth parts together rapidly. The Marathi flashed bright yellow. The Krelloks made a sound like rocks grinding. But Una knew what it meant. They were laughing at her. High Arbiter Thiessen raised one of his many arms, and the chamber went quiet. "Human," he said, his voice translated through speakers into something cold and mechanical. "Your species has been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. You have colonized exactly 0 worlds beyond your own. Your military consists of 43 ships, most of which are cargo vessels with weapons attached. You have nothing to offer the Council. No resources, no technology, no strategic value." He leaned forward, his crystal body catching the light. "Why should we help you?" Una had prepared for this question. She had spent months studying Council politics, learning about trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. They had arguments. Ready about long-term investment? About the precedent of allowing the Krovik to expand unchecked? But looking at Thessen's eyes, she knew none of that would matter. He had already made his decision, as they all had. Still, she tried. "The Krovik have conquered 17 systems in the last century," she said. "Each time, the Council has done nothing. Each time, they grow stronger. If you do not stop them now, eventually, they will become a threat to everyone." The Marathi representative pulsed blue skepticism. "The Krovik are valuable trade partners. Their expansion brings stability to unstable regions. Your system is in unclaimed space. They have every legal right to claim it." "Legal right?" Do-yoon stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "They plan to murder billions of people. They plan to enslave our children. What kind of law allows?" That Gion grabbed his arm and pulled him back, but the damage was done. The Council members shifted in their seats, offended by his outburst. Thiessen's voice turned even colder. "You speak of law, human, but you do not understand it. A strong take from the weak. This is the natural order of things. Your species is weak. The Krovik are strong. This is simply how the universe works." Una felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear, something else. Something harder. "We are asking for your help," she said quietly. "We are asking you to do what is right. Right. Thiessen made a sound that might have been a sigh. There is no right or wrong in the void of space, human. There is only power. You have none. The Krovik have much. The mathematics are simple. The vote was quick. 12 species, 12 votes against Earth's request. Not a single voice spoke in humanity's defense. As the votes were announced, Una looked around the chamber. She saw the Velith, ancient and proud, the Marathi, calculating and cold. The others, each wrapped up in their own concerns, their own interests. None of them cared about Earth. None of them cared about the billions of people who would die. She thought about her daughter, Mingi, who was 7 years old and dreamed of becoming an astronaut. She thought about her mother, who still tended her small garden in Busan and did not understand why her daughter had to travel so far away. She thought about every person on Earth who was counting on her to bring back hope. She had failed them all. The Council's decision is final, Thiessen announced. Earth's request for assistance is denied. You may leave. Una turned to go. Joan's hands were shaking with barely contained rage. Jian's eyes were wet with tears she refused to let fall. Then Thiessen spoke again. A word of advice, Ambassador, he called out. The Krovik are cruel to those who resist. If you surrender quickly, they may show mercy. Fight them, and they will make an example of your world. Every human will suffer. Every city will burn. Accept your fate with dignity, and perhaps some of your kind will survive as servants. Una stopped walking. For a long moment she stood still, her back to the council. Doyan and Gian watched her, waiting. Then she turned around. Her face had changed. The fear was gone. The desperation was gone. In their place was something that made even Thiessen pause, something old and dangerous and utterly human. Honored Council, Una said, her voice calm and clear. I thank you for your advice, but I must decline it. Humanity does not surrender. We never have. When enemies came to our shores, we fought them. When empires tried to enslave us, we resisted. When we faced extinction, we found a way to survive. She looked around the chamber, meeting every alien eye. You think we are weak because our ships are few and our history is short, but you do not understand what you are dealing with. You have never faced a species like us. And when the Krovik come for Earth, they will learn what we have learned through 10,000 years of war. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. That humans do not break. We do not bow, and we never ever give up. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind her, council members exchanged uncertain glances. They had dismissed thousands of petitions from weak species. They had heard countless desperate pleas, but none of them had ever sounded quite like that. The Kravik fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 47 warships dropped out. A faster-than-light traveled just beyond the moon, their dark shapes blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal insects. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest was the size of a mountain. The largest, the command vessel. It's as big as a city. Commander Cho Soon-ho watched them appear on his screens from the underground bunker beneath Seoul. He was a quiet man, 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. Had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it was here, and he felt strangely calm. Around him, officers and technicians worked at their stations. Some were crying quietly, others prayed. Most just stared at their screens, watching their doom arrange itself in perfect formation. Sir, said his aide, a young woman named Han Somi. They are broadcasting. Sunho nodded. Put it through. Main screen flickered, and the face of Fleet Commander Varesh appeared. He was Kraveka reptilian creature with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow fire. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that the translation software turned into flat, emotionless words. Humans of Earth, I am Fleet Commander Varesh of the Krovek Dominion. Your system has been designated for harvest. You will disable all weapons and defensive systems immediately. You will gather at designated collection points for processing. Those who comply will be treated according to their usefulness. Those who resist will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to respond. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bunker. Everyone looked at Sunho. He thought about his wife Yoonji, who had died 3 years ago from cancer. He thought about his son Taman, who was serving on one of the defense platforms near Mars. He thought about the billions of people above him, going about their lives, not yet knowing that death had come for them all. Then he pressed the broadcast button. "This is United Defense Commander Cho Sun-ho of the Earth Defense Force. I speak for all of humanity." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We have received your demands. We understand your threats. And we have decided our response." He looked at the screen showing the Krovik Fleet 47 ships against humanity's 43, most of which were repurposed cargo vessels with weapons bolted onto their hulls. "No," he said simply. "We will not surrender. We will not disable our defenses. We will not report for processing. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us. And we will make you pay for every meter of ground in blood." He ended the transmission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Varesh's face reappeared, his yellow eyes wide with what might have been confusion. "Human," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "You do not seem to understand your situation. Our fleet could destroy your entire civilization in hours. Your weapons cannot pierce our shields. Your ships are toys compared to ours. Resistance is not just futile, it is insane." Sun-ho almost smiled. "Maybe, but we are going to resist anyway." "Why?" Varesh seemed genuinely puzzled. "What do you hope to accomplish?" "You cannot win. You must know this." "We know," Sun-ho admitted, "but winning is not the point. The point is that you will know you were in a fight. The point is that our children will know we did not go quietly. The point is that when the history of humanity ends, it will end with us standing, not kneeling." Varesh stared at him for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Very well, human. You choose death. So be it." The transmission ended, and the Krovik fleet began to move. What happened next became legend across the galaxy. Captain Kang Do-yeon led the first fleet from his ship, the Defiance. It was an old cargo hauler, upgraded with the best weapons Earth could produce, which was not much by galactic standards. His fleet was 32 ships, crewed by men and women who knew they were going to die. They did not fight like other species. When a Velith ship was damaged, it retreated for repairs. When a Marathi vessel was outnumbered, it surrendered. This was logical. This was how civilized beings waged war. Humans did not retreat. When Do-yeon's ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When their weapons failed, they rammed their enemies. When their engines died, they overloaded their reactors and turned their ships into bombs. In the first hour, 12 human ships were destroyed. But they took 7 Krovik vessels with them, not through superior firepower, but through sheer suicidal determination. Varesh watched from his command ship, his scales going pale. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. "They are insane," his second-in-command whispered. "They throw their lives away like they mean nothing." "No," Varesh said slowly, beginning to understand. "Their lives mean everything to them. They are just willing to spend them." On the moon, human marines held the mining stations for 6 hours against overwhelming odds. When they ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives. When their knives broke, they fought with their hands. When the last station fell, the surviving defenders detonated the fuel reserves, taking 200 Kravik soldiers with them. On Earth, civilians watched the battle in the sky. They saw the flashes of light as ships died. They saw the Krovik transports beginning to descend, and instead of running, instead of hiding, they prepared to fight in soul. Old men and young women formed militias with hunting rifles and kitchen knives. In Cairo, engineers built bombs from fertilizer and household chemicals. In Mumbai, a grandmother named Bayunji, who shared a name with Sun-ho's late wife, strapped explosives to her chest and walked into a Krovik patrol. Smiling as she pressed the trigger, the Krovik had expected resistance to last hours. Instead, it lasted days, then weeks, then months. Varesh called for reinforcements. He called for more troops, more ships, more weapons. His superiors were confused. The humans were a primitive species with no real military. How could they possibly be holding out? Varesh did not know how to explain it. He did not have words for what he was facing. So Dr. Li Guyan explained it for him. From a bunker beneath Busan, she began broadcasting to every receiver in the galaxy. Her transmissions showed everything: the burning cities, the mass graves, the children dying in the streets. But they also showed something else. They showed a boy no older than 15 holding a broken rifle. Standing guard over a group of younger children, they showed a woman carrying her wounded husband through the rubble. Refusing to leave him behind, they showed human soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, charging Krovik positions with nothing but grenades and screaming defiance. "This is Earth," Guyan's voice said over the images. "We are dying, but we are not surrendering. We will never surrender. And we want the galaxy to see what the Krovik do to those who cannot defend themselves." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as steel. "We want the galaxy to see what cowards the Council are for abandoning us. And we want every species out there to know, if you do not stand up to tyranny, this is your future too." The broadcasts spread across known space. Billions of beings watched Earth burn, and slowly, something began to change. 6 months into the invasion, Earth was burning. The great cities were ruins. Half the population was dead or displaced. The Krovik controlled the skies and most of the surface. By every measure that mattered, humanity had lost, but they kept fighting. Dr. Li Gin had become the most famous human in the galaxy, though she did not know it. From her bunker beneath the rubble of Busan, she continued her broadcasts every day. She documented everything: the horrors and the heroism, the despair and the defiance. Today, she was recording from a makeshift hospital, surrounded by wounded soldiers and crying children. "The Krovik executed 2,000 prisoners in Beijing yesterday," she said into her camera, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "They lined them up in the streets and shot them one by one. It took 6 hours. The prisoners sang songs while they waited, old folk songs, children's rhymes, whatever they could remember. They sang until the very end." She paused to wipe her eyes. By midnight, every Krovik soldier in Beijing was dead. The resistance rose up and fought with hammers and broken bottles. They knew they could not win. They knew they would die. They did it anyway, because they could not stand to do nothing. These broadcasts reached every corner of the galaxy. Species that had never cared about Earth found themselves watching, unable to look away. On the water world of Thisar, young Marathi gathered in secret to discuss what they were seeing. Their elders told them the humans were foolish to resist, that surrender was the logical choice. But the young ones watched humans die for each other. The Separwenware. The Symphony Sever, Hemans, F7, once a 7, when at what recenses we sense hands from where I'd so into my immense system with some we I'm what I so. Why do we trade with the Krovik? Why do we accept a universe where the strong simply take what they want? On the Velith homeworld, military analysts studied Captain Kong Do-yoon's tactics with growing unease. He was still alive somehow, leading what remained of the human fleet in hit-and-run attacks. His strategies made no sense by conventional standards. He took insane risks. He attacked targets he could not possibly destroy. He sacrificed ships and lives in ways that seemed wasteful. But he kept winning, not big victories. The Krovik still had overwhelming force, but small ones. A supply convoy destroyed here. A patrol ambushed there. A transport ship full of reinforcements that never arrived. He fights without hope, a Velith admiral noted in a classified report. He expects to die. He has accepted his death completely. This makes him more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced, because he cannot be threatened or intimidated. He has nothing to lose. The report was supposed to be secret. Somehow, it was leaked to the public. Velith's citizens read it with a mixture of horror and strange admiration. On the Galactic Council, the mood was shifting. The junior species, those without voting power, had begun to protest. The Telkari, gentle amphibians, who had been conquered by the Council centuries ago, publicly recalled their ambassador. It was the first time any subject species had defied the Council so openly. "We refuse to be part of this," the Telkari representative announced. "The humans asked for help. You laughed at them. Now they die, and you do nothing. We cannot stop you, but we will not pretend to support you." The Yinshi, shrewd traders who dealt with everyone, announced they would no longer conduct business with the Krovek. It was a small gesture. The Yinshi were not a powerful species, but others followed. Trade routes began to shift. Supply lines grew complicated. High Arbiter Thiessen dismissed these reactions as emotional foolishness. "The humans will fall," he declared. "All primitive species do. This temporary sympathy will fade once they are gone." But privately, even he was beginning to worry, because the humans were not falling. Not the way they should. In the bunker beneath Seoul, Commander Cho Sun-ho coordinated the resistance with calm precision. He had lost 70% of his forces. He had lost his son Timan, killed defending a refugee convoy. He had lost almost everything, but he had not lost hope. "We cannot win this war through strength," he told his remaining officers. "The Krovik have more ships, more soldiers, more everything, so we will not try to match them. Instead, we will make them bleed for every victory. We will make this conquest so expensive that their leaders begin to question whether it is worth it." "And if they don't question it?" asked Han Somi, still at his side despite everything. "If they keep coming, no matter the cost?" Sun-ho was quiet for a moment. "Then we die," he said simply. "But we die, making them remember us forever." The strategy worked in its terrible way. The Krovik were conquerors, not occupiers. They were used to species that surrendered, that accepted their fate, that could be processed and put to work. Humans refused to be processed. Every factory the Krovik tried to operate was sabotaged. Every road they built was bombed. Every collaborator was executed by the resistance, not cruelly, but efficiently. The message was clear. There would be no peace under occupation. Varesh sent increasingly desperate reports to his superiors. He had conquered the planet, but he could not hold it. For every rebel he killed, 2 more appeared. For every city he pacified, 3 others erupted in violence. "These creatures do not think like us," he wrote. "They do not value their own lives the way normal species do. They will die for abstract concepts, freedom, honor, spite. I have seen humans attack armored vehicles with their bare hands. I have seen them starve themselves rather than work in our factories. I have seen children throw themselves at our soldiers with knives." He paused in his writing, his clawed hands trembling. "I am beginning to fear," he admitted, "that we have made a terrible mistake." Meanwhile, Ambassador Park Yuna was very busy. Everyone had assumed she died in the initial bombardment. The Krovik had targeted government buildings first, and Yuna had been in the capital when the attacks began. Her death was reported, mourned, and forgotten amid the larger catastrophe. But Yuna was not dead. She had escaped in the chaos, made her way to a hidden shuttle, and left Earth entirely, not to flee to recruit. For 6 months, she traveled the galaxy in a stolen ship, meeting with species the Council had ignored or oppressed. The Fenari, whose homeworld had been strip-mined by Velith corporations. The Kreloks, who had been forced to provide soldiers for Council wars. The dozens of smaller species who lived in the margins, afraid and angry and waiting for something to change. "I am not asking you to fight," Yuna told them. "Not yet. I am asking you to watch. Watch what the Krovik do to us. Watch what the Council allows. And when you have seen enough, ask yourself, Do you want to live in a galaxy where this is normal? Where the powerful do whatever they want, and everyone else just accepts it? Most species turned her away. They were afraid, and fear made them cautious. But some listened. Some had been waiting a long time for someone to say what Una was saying. By the 6th month of the invasion, Una had built a network. It was small and fragile, held together by shared anger and desperate hope. But it existed, and it was about to become something much more. On Earth, Gion made her final broadcast of the day. Behind her, medics worked frantically to save a young soldier who had lost both legs to a Krovic energy blast. He was screaming, but he was also laughing, because he had taken 3 enemies with him before he fell. "The Council thinks we are primitive," Gin said, looking directly into the camera. "They think we are weak and stupid and doomed. Maybe they are right. Maybe we will all die here, on this burning world, fighting an enemy we cannot defeat." She smiled, and there was something fierce in it. "But we will not die alone. We will not die forgotten. And we will not die without teaching the galaxy a lesson it will never forget." She leaned closer to the camera. "You can kill us, but you cannot break us. And as long as one human still draws breath, we will fight. That is who we are. That is what we are." Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched her words. And somewhere in that vast audience, something began to stir. Something that the Council had spent centuries trying to suppress. Hope, the Galactic Council Chamber had seen many strange things in its long history. It had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. It had hosted negotiations that ended wars and treaties that began them. But it had never seen anything like what happened on the day Ambassador Park Una returned. She walked in through the main entrance, just as she had done 8 months ago. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her came a procession of beings representatives from 37 different species. Walking together in a display of unity that had not been seen in centuries, the council members shifted uneasily in their seats. "Hi, Arbiter." Thiessen leaned forward, his crystalline body catching the light. "Ambassador Una," he said, his voice careful. "We were told you were dead." "Reports of my death were premature," Una replied calmly. She looked older than she had 8 months ago. Thinner. There were gray streaks in her hair that had not been there before. But her eyes were the same sharp, determined, and utterly unafraid. "You have no standing to address this council," Thiessen said. "Earth is under Krovic control. Your government no longer exists." "I am not here to address the council," Una said. "I am here to inform you of a new reality." She gestured to the beings behind her. There were Finari with their sharp teeth and clever hands, Krelliks with their bodies of living stone, Telkari with their shimmering scales and sad eyes, and dozens of other species the council had conquered, exploited, or simply ignored for generations. "Allow me to introduce the Coalition of Free Worlds," Una announced. "We represent 93 inhabited planets, 400 billion sentient beings, and a combined fleet of over 300 warships." The chamber went silent. Thiessen's eyes, all 12 of them, widened with shock. "This is impossible," he said. "These species have no military. They had no reason to fight before," Una interrupted. "They had no hope. They believed that resistance was futile, that the strong would always crush the weak, that the universe was simply unfair, and nothing could change it." She paused, letting her words sink in. Earth showed them something different. Earth showed them that you can say no, that you can fight back, that courage matters more than power. She stepped forward, her voice rising. "Do you know what you did when you rejected our plea? You taught the galaxy a lesson. Not the lesson you intended, not that the weak should surrender and accept their fate. You taught them that the council is not invincible, that the old order can be challenged, that if one small, primitive species can stand against the Krovic, then maybe others can stand against their oppressors too." Thiessen tried to speak, but Una continued. "The Krovic Empire is currently fighting rebellions on 6 of their conquered worlds. Their supply lines to Earth have been cut by coalition raiders. Their reinforcement fleet was ambushed 2 weeks ago. They lost 12 ships and never fired a single shot in return." She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Hi, Arbiter. The humans of Earth may be dying, But the idea of Earth is spreading, and you cannot bomb an idea. You cannot conquer it. You cannot make it surrender. The Marathi representative pulsed with agitated colors. This is madness. You cannot challenge the established order. The council has maintained peace for peace. A new voice rang out. It belonged to Representative Gel at the Finari, a small creature with fur the color of rust and eyes like black marbles. You call this peace? My people have been slaves to Velith corporations for 300 years. We mine the minerals that build your ships. We die in your factories. Our children are born into debt they can never repay. Is that peace? Another voice joined in. Representative Korath of the Krelloks, his stone body grinding as he spoke. The council takes our warriors to fight your wars. They die on worlds they have never seen, for causes they do not understand. When they return, if they return, they are broken in body and spirit. And you call this peace? More voices rose. The Telkari, the Yinshi, the countless species who had been told their place was at the bottom, serving those above. For the first time, they were speaking as equals. For the first time, they were being heard. Thiessen raised his arms for silence. You are making a terrible mistake, he said, his voice cold. The council will not tolerate this rebellion. We will crush you, just as we have crushed every other. No, Yuna cut him off. You will not. She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed the galaxy not as a map, but as a network of lights and lines representing trade routes, military positions, and communication channels. 60% of your trade passes through space controlled by coalition members, she said. Your food supplies come from Telkari agricultural worlds. Your ships are built with Krelloks labor. Your economy depends on species you have spent centuries treating as inferior. She pointed to a cluster of lights near the edge of the map. That is Earth. Still burning. Still fighting. For 8 months, the Krovik have thrown everything they have at one small planet, and they cannot hold it. They are losing ships. They are losing soldiers. They are losing their reputation. She turned back to face Thiessen. The question is not whether you can defeat us. The question is whether you want to spend the next century fighting. Whether you want to watch your empire tear itself apart while you try to hold on to power. Whether you want to be remembered as the leaders who destroyed everything rather than accept change.
How does?
Thiessen was silent. For the first time in his long life, he had no answer. Far away on Earth, the tide of war was turning. Commander Cho Sunho watched his tactical displays with something he had not felt in months' hope. Coalition ships were arriving in the system. Not many, not yet, but enough to break the Krovik blockade. Supplies were getting through. Reinforcements were landing. Sir, said Han Somi, her voice cracking with emotion. We are receiving transmissions from the surface. The resistance is reporting that Krovik forces are retreating in multiple sectors. Some units are surrendering. Sunho nodded slowly. They know they have lost. Not the war, not yet, but the momentum. They came here expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they found something they did not know how to fight. Captain Kong Doyen's voice crackled over the communication system. He was still out there, still leading what was left of the fleet. Commander Krovik flagship is attempting to withdraw. Should we pursue? Sunho considered for a moment. The old him, the commander who had watched his son die and his world burn, might have said yes. Might have wanted revenge above all else, but that was not what humanity needed. Not anymore. Let them go, he said. Let them return to their masters and explain what happened here. Let them tell the story of what humans are willing to do for freedom. That message will do more damage than any weapon we could fire. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Dayin laughed a strange sound, bitter and tired but real. Understood, Commander. We will let them run. And we will make sure they remember us. The Krovik fleet began its retreat. Not a rout they were too disciplined for that, but a withdrawal. An acknowledgement that this conquest had failed. That humanity, against all odds and all reason, had refused to break. In her bunker, Dr. Li Gian made one final broadcast. This is Earth, she said, her voice thick with exhaustion and relief. "We are still here. We are battered and broken, and we have lost so much. But we are still here." She paused to wipe her eyes. "To everyone who watched and did nothing, we do not forget. To everyone who helped, who risked everything to stand with us, we will never forget. And to anyone out there who is afraid, who thinks they cannot fight back, who believes the powerful will always win." She smiled through her tears. "Look at us. We were supposed to die. We were supposed to surrender. We were supposed to accept our fate like good little primitives. Instead, we showed the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far." She leaned into the camera one last time. "We are still learning to walk among the stars. We are young and small, and we have so much to learn. But we are not afraid anymore, and neither should you be." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and began to believe. 1 year after the Galactic Council laughed at Earth's plea for help, Ambassador Park Yuna stood in the same chamber, in the same spot, looking at the same elevated seats. But everything else had changed. Half the seats were empty. The Marathi representative had fled when their government collapsed under pressure from their own people. The Velithai Arbiter Thiessen had been recalled in disgrace, replaced by a younger, more cautious leader. 3 council species had withdrawn entirely. Unwilling to be associated with the old order any longer, the Coalition of Free Worlds had grown to 119 member species. Their combined fleet now numbered over 500 ships, still smaller than the Council's forces, but large enough to make any conflict costly. And on Earth, reconstruction had begun. The war had lasted 14 months in total. The Kravik Dominion had formally surrendered 8 weeks ago, after their own government collapsed under the weight of military defeats and internal rebellion. Fleet Commander Varesh had been captured trying to flee the system. He was currently awaiting trial for crimes against humanity, a new legal concept that the Coalition had insisted on establishing. Yuna looked around the chamber, remembering how small she had felt the first time she stood here. She did not feel small anymore. "I am here," she announced, "to inform the Council of the terms of the Kravik surrender. Earth will oversee the transition of their conquered territories to self-governance. War criminals will be tried under a new interstellar court. Reparations will be paid to all species harmed by Kravik aggression." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Oh." "Furthermore, the Coalition proposes a new framework for galactic governance. One based not on power, but on cooperation. One where the voices of all species are heard, not just those with the largest fleets. One where conquest and exploitation are recognized as crimes, not accepted as natural." The remaining council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected this moment, had been dreading it, in fact. They had thought the humans might seek revenge, might demand the same kind of dominion that the council had held for so long. "You could destroy us," one of them said. "You have the power now. Why do you not use it?" Yuna considered the question. Behind her, watching via holographic transmission, were the people who had made this victory possible. Commander Cho Sunho, still in his underground bunker, still coordinating the defense of a planet that no longer needed defending. He looked exhausted, bone-deep, tired in a way that might never heal. But there was peace in his eyes, too. His son Timon's death had not been in vain. Captain Kong Do-yan, standing on the bridge of his battered ship. He had become a legend across the galaxy, the human who fought without hope and won anyway. Songs were being written about him on 100 worlds. He did not care about the songs. He cared about the crew members who had survived, and the families of those who had not. Dr. Lee Goon. Still broadcasting from Busan, she had become the voice of human resistance. And now, she was becoming the voice of human reconciliation. Her latest documentaries focused not on the horrors of war, but on the small acts of kindness happening in its aftermath, humans helping rebuild alien communities, former enemies learning to work together. Han Somi, who had stayed by Sunho's side through everything. She had been promoted 3 times during the war, and was now one of the youngest admirals in human history. She still looked surprised every time someone saluted her, and countless others. The soldiers who had fought, the civilians who had resisted, the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things because giving up was not in their nature. Una thought about all of them as she formulated her answer. We could destroy you, she agreed. We could take your power and use it for ourselves. We could become the new tyrants, the new oppressors, the new masters of the galaxy. She shook her head slowly. But that is not who we are. That is not why we fought. We did not endure everything we endured just to become the thing we were fighting against. She stepped forward, looking directly at the council members. You asked us once why you should help us. You said we had nothing to offer. No resources. No technology. No power, she smiled. You were right. We had nothing except our stubbornness, our courage, and our absolute refusal to accept defeat. And that was enough, the Velith representative said quietly. It was not a question. It was enough, Una confirmed. Not because we are special. Not because humans are better than other species. But because sometimes all it takes is one voice willing to say no. One people willing to stand up. One moment of defiance that shows everyone else what is possible. She gestured to the coalition representatives behind her. These species did not join us because we are powerful. They joined us because we showed them that power is not everything. That courage matters. That hope matters. That even the smallest, weakest species in the galaxy can change the course of history if they are willing to fight for what they believe in. The chamber was silent. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the new Velith leader rose from his seat. He was younger than Thiessen, with a lighter color to his crystalline body. When he spoke, his voice was careful but sincere. The council has made many mistakes, he said. We have been arrogant. We have been cruel. We have told ourselves that might makes right, that the universe is simply unfair, that nothing can change. He paused. The humans have proven us wrong. Perhaps it is time we learn from them. One by one, the other council members rose. Not in surrender and acknowledgement. In acceptance of a new order that they did not control, might still be part of. Later, after the formal proceedings were complete, Una found a quiet moment to herself. She stood at a window overlooking the council station's garden's artificial ecosystems from a dozen worlds. Growing side by side in careful harmony, Doyen found her there. It is strange, she said without turning around. We won. Against all odds, against all reason, we won. So why do I feel so tired? Doyen came to stand beside her. His uniform was crisp and new, a gift from the coalition, to replace the worn-out clothes he had been wearing for months. He looked uncomfortable in it. Because winning was the easy part, he said. Now we have to figure out what comes next. How to rebuild. How to heal. How to make sure this never happens again. That sounds even harder than fighting, Una admitted. It will be. Doyen was quiet for a moment. But we will do it anyway. Because that is what we do. We face impossible challenges. We complain about them. And then we figure out how to overcome them. It is the human way. Una laughed a real laugh. The first one she had allowed herself in over a year. I suppose it is. They stood together in silence, watching the alien plants grow. Somewhere below, negotiations were continuing. Somewhere above, ships were being decommissioned. Somewhere on Earth, people were emerging from shelters and bunkers. Blinking in the sunlight of a world that had almost been destroyed, it would take years to rebuild. Decades to heal. Generations to truly move past what had happened. The scars would remain in the land, on the people. On the collective memory of every human who had lived through the war. But they would survive. They would adapt. They would grow stronger. That was the lesson Earth had taught the galaxy. Not that humans were invincible or superior. Not that courage always wins, or that good always triumphs over evil. The lesson was simpler and more profound. That even in the darkest moments, even when all hope seems lost, even when the entire universe tells you to give up, it is possible to say no. It is possible to stand up. It is possible to fight for something better. And sometimes, against all odds, it is possible to win. The galaxy had learned that lesson now. They would not forget it. neither would humanity. In her bunker, Gillen made one last broadcast. She was not alone this time. Behind her stood dozens of survivors. Soldiers and civilians and children who had lived through the impossible. "This is Earth," she said, for the last time. "We are wounded. We are tired. We are changed in ways we do not yet understand. But we are alive. We are free. And we are just getting started." She reached over and turned off the camera. The war was over. The future had begun.